You've heard about these kids. They don't respect anyone. They don't understand anything that isn't a hashtag. They don't speak proper English. These kids can't read. And those teachers, they don't teach anyway. They're just collecting a paycheck. Those teachers don't care about their students. We've all heard about these kids and those teachers. They're ruining our educational system, they're failing kids, and they're wasting taxpayer money. But these pervasive generalizations are one-sided narratives of an education system that has many issues, but even more successes. I'm one of those teachers. We are the underappreciated, underpaid, unsung heroes of public education. We get the leftover buildings, tax money, and resources, and somehow create memorable educational experiences for students everywhere. I'm one of those teachers who spends thousands of dollars on my classroom to create a lively space out of an empty, colorless room. I'm one of those teachers who hoards every resource, no matter how small, because I know at some point I will need 47 toilet paper rolls. I'm one of the 3.7 million teachers who will educate K-12 students in the United States this year. I'm one of those die-hard, dedicated to my craft teachers who sees endless possibilities when others have decided it wasn't worth it. I live and breathe education. It is my calling, my passion, my joy, and the reason I sit on the floor during a TED Talk. When I became a teacher, I felt prepared to teach these kids for the simple fact that I was once one of them. Not only did I graduate from the K-12 public school system, I did it as a student who fell between the cracks. My earliest memories of education were the whisperings of teachers and administrators who talked about me not as a student, but as a foster child. Teachers who treated me as if it were my fault I had been removed from my parents' care. Very early on, I learned that school could be a good, kind, and safe place, but only if you got the right teacher. For me, the right teacher was Miss Pullen, who allowed me to read after I completed all of my math assignments. Miss Foster, the first person to pronounce my name correctly. And Miss Masterton, for some reason, championed me despite my obnoxious, angry at the world attitude. Even now, I can vividly recall the dynamic teachers of my school years. You know the ones I'm talking about because you had them too. The ones who made us think, who treated us as if we were real people. The teachers who didn't take themselves too seriously. Those teachers who treated us as more than just a test score. The teachers who really got to know us and who paid for the clothing and participation fees of those of us who would have gone without. But unfortunately, I was still an outlier in an educational system that wasn't built for me. When I became a teacher, I felt prepared for anything and everything that the educational system could throw at me. I'd had so many varied experiences and the firsthand knowledge that education isn't equitable for everyone. I knew I was more prepared than first-year teachers. The universe is still laughing at me for assuming I was ready. I had no idea. Even now, in year 7, my role, my job, my function changes daily. But one thing doesn't change, and it's my favorite part: these kids. Let me tell you about these kids. 21% of these kids live below the federal poverty threshold of $25,000 a year for a family of 4. In my schools, 95% of my kids receive free breakfast and lunch, yet they still go home hungry. Nothing in this world can prepare you for a hungry student who's not prepared to think about anything but the rumble of their empty tummy. I wasn't prepared for my first school, an 80-year-old building in a predominantly black and brown neighborhood with the windows stuck open during the 2 Texas seasons, active volcano and guess the weather. The live wires sticking out of my classroom, or the 8-year-old girl who slept during my reading lessons because she had spent the night taking care of her diabetic grandmother at home. My student teaching placement schools did not prepare me for this. So I did what all those teachers do. I rolled up my sleeves. I brought in heaters, blankets, fans, and popsicles. I decorated around the wires and cordoned off a section of my room. I made home visits and ensured Grandma had rides to the doctor. I had a clothing donation drive to ensure that my kids were warm and had clothes. And I let that little girl sleep through my class because honestly, you can't learn if your brain is exhausted. Despite seeing all of these issues, I felt voiceless and trapped. How could I advocate for change when the resources didn't exist and others turned a blind eye? But little did I know, these kids have the answer. These kids rise up from what little they do have and do amazing things. Whether it's my 3rd graders creating a recycling club at our school because they're tired of all the trash on their playground, or high school students at South Oak Cliff High School staging a walkout to protest the roof leaks and the gas leaks of their school. These kids have the empathy and creativity to solve the issues they face every day. But no one asks them. Imagine what these kids could do with more equitable resources that address their root causes and the ability and opportunity to use their voices. One of the truest statements my mentor teacher ever told me was that we have to meet these kids where they're at to create success. It means when a kid tells you they had a rough night or they needed homework help, you change to meet those needs. Those teachers ask students why they're upset, ask them why they're not engaged, and reflect on how they can better serve students. So when a student tells me they're hungry or there was no one at home to help with their math assignment, I know that I need to dip into my emergency stash of granola bars and make time during my lunch to go over the math homework. Tired of feeling helpless, I decided that I needed to look for longer, better lasting solutions. I really wanted to create a classroom in which students could be successful despite all of the uncontrollable factors. For the first time in my life, I owned all of my identities and brought them into the classroom because I know going through these issues alone is difficult, but going through these issues as a kindergartner or a 3rd grader is unthinkable. So instead of looking like the polished, infallible teacher, I admitted to my students that I had grown up in poverty and in foster care. For kindergartners, too many students understood what that was. I talked about what it was like to have an incarcerated mother and a deported father. My students could see themselves in me. We were all dealing with the same sorts of trauma. From that moment on, my classroom changed completely Students who were once unreachable and defiant were suddenly attempting to participate and do work that we knew was too difficult for them. These kids, now fourth graders, because of the bonds we built from these candid conversations, still send me invitations to their birthday parties and call me for homework help. Fourth grade is hard. But these kids, they come to school every day with their whole selves. They deal with incarcerated family members, deportation, hunger, extreme poverty, and so much worse. These kids are my heroes. These kids have taught me far more than I have taught them. And somewhere along the way, these kids have become my kids. When COVID-19 hit, I was thrown for a loop. Education was the last thing on my mind. Suddenly, I went from being a teacher to delivering fresh fruits, vegetables, and toilet paper. I was sitting on front porches teaching families how to navigate Chromebooks and iPads. I became the main source of news for marginalized families who didn't have access to or couldn't understand state, local, and federal news. My Spanish went from me teaching materia y elementos de ficción to teaching how you could be asymptomatico and still have el coronavirus. For a brief few minutes, teachers were the shining stars of the pandemic. We were lauded for supporting and helping families navigate the education system. But as we started to talk about how we didn't feel safe returning to our classrooms in the midst of a pandemic, we were the most despised people in the United States. We were those teachers again. Not only do these kids and those teachers shoulder the burden of hunger, poverty, lack of resources, lack of parent support and involvement, they also shoulder the blame. We don't see these as issues of community responsibility. We see them as issues of personal responsibilities. Why can't they get their test scores up? Why can't they turn in their homework? Why can't they get their kids to school on time? But these are not individual issues. These are societal issues. The educational gaps were not created by the Black and brown and low socioeconomic communities, and they will not be solved by their individual labor alone. Food deserts, high incarceration rates, extreme poverty, failing schools, over-policing of minority neighborhoods. We have created and fueled an educational system that is more likely to put our kids in the prison system than in college. And that did not happen overnight or by accident. These kids deserve better. And I can't do it alone. We need help. Chances are, you know a great teacher, you've had a great teacher, or a great teacher is teaching your kids right now. And they're doing it with very little support while they're dealing with their own trauma from 2 concurrent pandemics. And they're creating online lessons and face-to-face lessons. They're doing it while we're helping you troubleshoot Chrome and internet issues. Because it's what we always do. Those teachers know that educational policies change within the direction of the wind. We need help. You can be the help, the change, the revolution. You can make sure that my kids don't get lost, left behind, or funneled into prison. Because I'm not just a teacher. I'm a teacher, counselor, mentor, translator, nurse, bodyguard extraordinaire. We all are. And we do this to pick up the gaps of the educational system. So do your part. Vote, use your voice, volunteer, support these teachers who never give up on our kids. Because when teachers are trusted, supported, respected, paid well, and allowed to do their jobs, these kids can achieve, learn, and grow. These kids are our future. And when these kids become our kids, we will all succeed. Thank you.